The early days, the early weeks, the early months, they can be pretty challenging for people and for communities. And, I know something you talk about is the first 6 months in particular. So could you mention a little bit about the challenges, the common challenges and difficulties that some people will encounter during that first period of time?
I can remember in Ash Wednesday, we had regular meetings of the service network, Health and Welfare Service Network. And after a few months, there was a period where things sort of settled. People weren't using all the services much. And I remember the local GP saying, I think we're just about over this. A few weeks later, he was saying, I don't know what's going on. I've got people coming into me, they're having accidents with chainsaws, their marriages are breaking down, they're having health crises, the police are saying they're having to deal with a whole lot of aggression in the behaviour and so on. And this crisis around about 6 months shows up again and again and again. I remember being at a conference where the counselling service in New York after September 11 showed their statistics, and you get a great peak straight away, then it tails off, and then at 6 months it kicks up, and it kicks up at the anniversary, and then at the 18-month mark. Now, I've often said to people planning their recovery, organisations, local government, so you wait the 6 months, and they say it's exactly the way you said. Now, I reckon it works like this, that people, healthy people, put aside a lot of their traumatic experience and losses and grief and anxiety, and they just go into this adrenaline mode, and they have so much to do. And they try to do it as fast as they can because their idea is, I want to get back to normal.
Yeah, because if you can get back to normal, it's all over.
What they don't understand is they can't do it as fast as they need to because governments can't work fast enough. They can't get approvals. They can't get building approvals because the whole system is completely overwhelmed. Nothing can work as fast as they want it to. And most of the time, they're doing a lot of things they've never done before. They don't know how long it takes to get all sorts of approvals. And so they keep having, I put it this way, that a lot of the social processes have been designed to enable people to have good, safe, productive lives. But in the disaster, those very processes feel disabling because I keep hitting brick walls. I keep banging my head against the bureaucracy that can't respond and doesn't know what I want and so on. Now, when that's happening, you get a whole emotional stress on top of the other one because they're not pacing themselves with what's possible because they're having their first disaster.
Because I was thinking then there has to be something going on behind the increase in referrals at the 6 month mark. So, what you're explaining, I guess, is what's occurring underneath the surface for individuals and for communities that sort of brings it to a point.
So they're having this sort of additional frustration that becomes central to their whole experience. The other thing is that it is a hallmark of healthy people that they can put aside their bad experience and do what they have to do. But that takes a lot of energy, to put aside grief, to put aside anxiety and trauma and really big worries about the long term, to just focus on this takes emotional energy. And you can do it for a while, and some people who maybe, have just had a nice long holiday and have got a nice life and no other great problems, they can actually maybe do it for 6, maybe 8 months before they start to get very tired. But other people who've got a lot of other problems, or they've got a young family and they're not getting much sleep and so on, then after about 3 or 4 months they start to get so tired and they can't hold that emotional blockage against their experience. And what that looks like is they suddenly have panic attacks. I don't know how I'm going to manage this. Or they suddenly have nightmares about the circumstance of the disaster, that they're caught in a bushfire and what they dreaded happens. They see people around them dying, or they think, I'm going to die, and they suddenly wake up instead of dying. and all these things, and then they start to feel this post-traumatic anxiety. And so, it's very predictable because they haven't been giving themselves enough leisure and time out and taking care of themselves, and maybe haven't been making good plans about how to do things while holding the things that give them their value and confidence.
So it's the picture that comes to mind is of the dormant volcano that then erupts at 6 months.
That's right.
I think what you're just starting to talk about there, then, or lead into there, is that there may be ways to prevent the volcano erupting for some people or for many people.
Absolutely. And I think the more people understand that adrenaline is very good to survive the event, but it's a liability in trying to get your recovery, because you will make very narrowly focused decisions that you probably can't have control of because you're dependent on the insurance company or the builder or whatever else. And that really means you're having this sense of loss of control. Now, control is to do with the way we think about things. I'm in control if I know I'm going to put my plans in, it's going to take them a few months to approve them, so what am I going to do in the meantime? Whereas if I'm waiting every day and ringing up all the time, I'm out of control.
Yes, yeah.
And developing this emotional crisis. So if people focus on their emotional state, and again, American research has showed this by distinguishing problems-focused coping, that is, I'm dealing with my problems, versus emotionally focused coping, which is I'm dealing with how I feel. The people who just focus on their problems often don't do as well as the people who take care of their emotions.
Which makes sense, because if you're focused only on your problems, you're not going to be tuned into what's happening for you as a person, emotionally or otherwise, and you're certainly not going to be tuned into what's happening around you, with your wife or your partner or your kids. So you can sort of start to see how everything comes together. So there's some key important things for people to be aware of and do early on. They would be bringing awareness back to yourself.
Understanding that I need to be aware of my stress state, and my family and friendship network need to help me keep track of myself, because none of us can really keep track of ourselves when we're under a state of stress.
Yeah. And then there's that, I think those two other really important issues that we see come up again and again. The first one relates to expectations that people have around how quickly the recovery process and the material recovery process will occur. Unfortunately, it generally always takes longer than people expect. And then secondly, there's that speed with which you do things. The best thing to do is to slow it down. Bring your awareness back to yourself and invest time in those things in life that are important, that further down the track, you can have a house that's rebuilt, but if you're not getting on with your wife or your kids, in a way, what's the point?
That's right. Yeah. And people sometimes talk about that, the breakdown of a marriage or the loss of their connection with the kids, or the kids start to develop problems in their own right, or they've taken their eye off their career, or their business goes bankrupt. They often talk about that as the second disaster. And that often happens after the 6 months. It happens in the second half of the first year and in the second year. So that there are two problems. There's the physical disaster and the trauma of the emergency itself, which has a whole lot of effects. But then there are all these repercussions, I think, of the way in which it impacts in a secondary way from the state I'm in recovery. Now, that I have some control over. I can look after myself. And one of the things I suggest to people to protect themselves from the second disaster is to really put a high priority on everything that gives your life value, quality, meaning, and prioritise those things. Don't put them off. You won't get through it fast enough before there'll be some loss there. So make sure that if you have to go to a temporary accommodation, that you get a nice, comfortable place as soon as you can, where you can start to live a life which is valuable. And in that sense, when that exhaustion comes at the 6 months, you won't be so exhausted as to get depressed. You'll just be tired and say, maybe we need to take a bit of a holiday and get away from the area for a while.
Yeah, so really at the end of the day, the first 6 months, there's actually an opportunity to lay a foundation that's going to support the rest of your recovery, potentially.
And to be aware that that'll be a crisis time, around about some months down the track, let's say. And we need to have that in mind as we go through those early months.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thanks.